Oprah stepped onto the private jet, with her usual calm elegance, her eyes scanning the familiar first-class cabin. As she walked down the aisle, her thoughts already on the business meetings ahead. The hum of the engines provided a steady backdrop to the quiet comfort of the plane. But something felt off today. The usual warmth she received from the crew was absent. She noticed it immediately as she glanced at the flight attendants who were going about their tasks with mechanical precision. But it was Maria who caught her attention. Maria was standing by the galley, as if waiting for something. Her eyes briefly flicked toward Oprah, before quickly looking away, a chill running through the air that Oprah couldn't shake. Maria's expression was unreadable. No smile, no recognition, just a glance that seemed distant and almost dismissive. Oprah didn't think much of it at first, but as she took her seat and settled in for the flight, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. As the plane took off, the quiet hum of the engines now felt louder, somehow like it was amplifying the silence between her and the flight attendants. Maria was walking down the aisle, carefully attending to the other passengers, but there was no effort in her movements, no sense of hospitality, no attempt to make anyone feel welcome. Oprah couldn't put her finger on it, but the coldness in the air seemed to intensify every time their eyes met. Maria moved past her without a word, and Oprah felt a pang of confusion. She wasn't used to being ignored like this on a flight. It was time for the drink service, and Oprah settled back in her seat, ready to ask for her usual. She had always ordered the same special drink that wasn't on the menu, but it was something she knew was always available for her, a small request that made her feel like she was being treated with care. She had no reason to think anything would be different today. But as Maria approached with the tray of drinks, Oprah casually asked for her usual. When Maria heard the request, she paused just for a second too long before replying in a tone that was sharp, almost as if she had already decided this moment was going to happen this way. "I don't serve anything outside of the menu," Maria said flatly, not even a flicker of recognition or kindness in her voice. Oprah blinked for a moment, unsure of what to say. She had heard many things over the years, but this was new. She wasn't angry, but surprised. The refusal felt cold in a way she wasn't used to. Maria's face remained emotionless as she stood there waiting for Oprah to respond, as if the decision was final, as if the words she had spoken had ended the conversation. Oprah hesitated for just a second, wondering if she had misheard, or if perhaps Maria was just having a bad day, but the stern look on Maria's face made it clear this wasn't an error or misunderstanding. Oprah's usual patience kicked in, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening. She wondered if this was an isolated incident, or if there was something more to it, something beyond just a drink refusal. As the minutes passed and the quiet of the cabin settled around her, Oprah couldn't let go of the unsettling feeling in her chest. She glanced out the window, watching the clouds roll by. But even the beauty of the view didn't help ease her mind. Something was nagging at her. Maybe it was Maria's demeanor. Maybe it was the way she had refused the request with such finality. But Oprah couldn't ignore the growing sense of tension between them. It felt like an unspoken challenge, like there was more happening here than a simple disagreement over a drink. And she was beginning to wonder if she was about to find out just what that was. The plane continued its smooth ascent into the sky, but Oprah couldn't shake the tension building in the air. She tried to focus on her thoughts, her plans, her next steps, but the feeling gnawed at her, the unease lingering like an unexpected shadow. The cabin around her was calm, with passengers quietly reading or listening to music, but in the midst of this serenity there was a disquiet that Oprah couldn't ignore. Maria moved up and down the aisle with mechanical precision. The soft clinking of drink trays and the rustling of napkins were the only sounds breaking the silence. But something about Maria's movements felt different. There was a stiffness in the way she walked, the way she held her tray, almost as if she were trying to keep her distance from everyone around her, as though every step was carefully calculated and deliberate. Oprah watched Maria from the corner of her eye, unable to understand what was happening. Maria's gaze never lingered on her. Not once did she offer a smile or even a brief glance when their paths crossed. It was as if Oprah wasn't even there, and the more Oprah tried to make sense of it, the more unsettling it became. There was a growing sense of isolation, the kind you feel when someone is deliberately ignoring your presence, when you realize that somehow you've become invisible despite being right in front of them. Oprah wondered if this was personal, if it had anything to do with her, or if Maria was just this way with everyone, but something about the coldness in the air suggested otherwise. As the minutes stretched on, Oprah's mind drifted back to the moment when Maria had refused her request for the special drink. She had heard the words clearly, but still found it difficult to believe she hadn't misheard. Maria had always been professional before. Her tone had been flat and devoid of any empathy. But what struck Oprah the most was the finality with which Maria had spoken. There had been no room for negotiation, no softness, just a cold dismissal, as if the request had been an offense in itself. Oprah didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to escalate something that could easily be brushed off. But the refusal stung in a way that she hadn't expected, and the more she thought about it, the more it felt personal, like Maria had decided in that moment that she wasn't worth the trouble to make a simple exception. Oprah turned her attention to the other passengers, but the unease remained. The other flight attendants moved about the cabin with their usual grace and professionalism. But Maria remained distant, never once glancing toward Oprah. Even as she moved past her seat with the drink cart, she avoided looking her way. As if they were strangers, she felt a pang of frustration, but swallowed it down, choosing instead to focus on the fact that she had a long flight ahead, and getting caught up in this strange interaction would only make the hours drag on. She tried to dismiss the incident, telling herself it was nothing, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away as the plane continued its flight and time seemed to stretch on. Oprah found herself growing more and more irritated with herself for not understanding what was happening. It was unlike her to be rattled by something so trivial, but this wasn't just about a drink. It was about something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. She began to wonder about Maria's background and what could have led her to act this way. Had Oprah done something to provoke her? Had she crossed some invisible line that no one else could see? She hadn't meant to upset anyone, but the refusal felt so deliberate, so cold, that it was hard to shake the feeling that there was more to this than she was being told. As the flight settled into a steady rhythm, with the soft hum of the engines in the background, Oprah leaned back in her seat, eyes scanning the cabin once more, her mind turning over the strange encounter with Maria. She was used to being treated well on flights, and even if there were moments of tension with staff, it was always quickly smoothed over. This, however, felt different. This felt personal, and Oprah knew she couldn't ignore it for much longer. The hours seemed to stretch endlessly as the plane cut through the sky. Oprah's mind wandered, but it kept circling back to Maria. There was something about the flight attendants' indifference that kept gnawing at her like an unsolved puzzle. Oprah was used to being surrounded by people who admired her. She was accustomed to the glances, the smiles, the small gestures of respect from those who worked around her. But this was different. This was a refusal and a coldness she couldn't ignore. Her eyes flickered to the galley where Maria was moving quietly. She had her back turned, but Oprah couldn't help but notice the rigidity in her posture as she fiddled with the drink cart. It was like Maria was shutting herself off from the world around her. The more Oprah observed, the more she began to feel a growing sense of isolation in the cabin. She couldn't remember a time when she had ever been so blatantly disregarded by someone in her line of sight. It was almost as if Maria had drawn a line in the sand, and Oprah had unknowingly crossed it. Oprah felt the tension creep under her skin, a sensation she couldn't shake. It was like being in the middle of a room full of people, yet somehow feeling invisible, as if the space around her had suddenly become alien, and she was being watched but not acknowledged. She couldn't help but wonder if she was the target of something larger than just a simple disagreement over a drink. The flight continued its smooth course, the hum of the engines now a low, constant drone that seemed to amplify the silence between Oprah and Maria. As the seconds ticked by, Oprah's frustration grew, but she didn't want to be the one to escalate things. She had been in countless situations where people had tried to provoke her into reacting. But this felt different. Maria wasn't trying to provoke her. It was something deeper. It was almost like Maria had made a silent decision to shut Oprah out entirely, and that alone was what bothered Oprah the most. She wasn't used to being dismissed without explanation. It felt like a challenge. It felt like Maria was daring Oprah to say something to break the silence. But Oprah wasn't sure if she should respond to it or let it be. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Oprah leaned forward and pressed the call button. The soft chime rang out, and soon Maria appeared at her side. She stood there for a moment, her eyes still avoiding Oprah's, her body tense, as though she was expecting some kind of confrontation. But Oprah held her gaze firmly. This time she didn't look away. She didn't let Maria's coldness intimidate her. Oprah's voice was calm, but with a quiet authority as she spoke. "Maria, may I ask what's going on?" Maria paused, her eyes flickering briefly to Oprah's before quickly looking down at her tray. She seemed to hesitate, as if debating whether or not to speak, but the silence between them stretched, and Maria finally let out a long breath. "It's nothing," she said, the words so flat that they seemed to hang in the air between them, as if they didn't make sense. Oprah's brow furrowed. She had expected a response of some kind, but this only made the situation feel more uncertain. "Nothing," Oprah repeated, as if searching for the truth in the simple word. Maria's lips parted as if she wanted to say more, but then she clamped them shut. Oprah's mind raced. This wasn't how she expected this to go. She had thought that Maria might explain herself, maybe apologize for the coldness, or even offer a reason for her behavior. But instead, Maria stood there like a closed door, one that Oprah couldn't open, no matter how hard she tried to find the key. And in that moment, Oprah felt the shift. Something subtle but powerful moved in the air between them, as if the very essence of the flight had changed. The atmosphere had thickened, as if the unresolved tension was now taking on a life of its own. It was no longer just about a drink request. It was about something deeper, something that Oprah could sense, but not yet understand. And she knew then that the next step would determine everything. She could feel it in her gut. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding. This was something that would unravel itself in time, but she didn't know how or when. Oprah watched Maria as she stood there waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. The quiet of the cabin felt heavy, as if the weight of unspoken words had settled between them. Maria's posture was rigid, almost as if she was bracing for something. Oprah didn't know what to say, but she couldn't let it go. She couldn't let the air between them stay so thick, so unresolved. There was a flicker of something in Maria's eyes, a hesitation that Oprah could feel, even though Maria refused to show it. Oprah's gaze softened slightly, but she didn't look away. There was something here, something she needed to understand, and she knew that if she didn't push now, it would haunt her for the rest of the flight. Maria shifted her weight, uncomfortably, still avoiding Oprah's eyes, but her hands were trembling ever so slightly as they gripped the tray. The tension in the air was palpable. Oprah had dealt with countless personalities over the years. She had faced challenges with grace and patience, but this was different. Maria wasn't a problem to be solved. She wasn't someone to be managed or placated. There was something deeply personal in the way she was reacting, and Oprah felt the truth settling in her chest, like a weight that was impossible to ignore. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, Oprah spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Maria, I can tell there's more going on than you're letting on. If there's something you want to say, or if I've done something to upset you, I'd like to know." The words hung in the air between them for a long moment. Maria's gaze flickered up for the briefest of seconds before she looked away again, her mouth pressed into a thin line. But something in her demeanor shifted just a little. It was as if the walls she had built around herself were starting to crack just a tiny bit. "You don't understand." Maria's voice was barely above a whisper, but it was enough to send a shiver down Oprah's spine. The vulnerability in her tone was almost imperceptible, but it was there. Oprah leaned forward slightly, urging her to continue, her own curiosity growing, but also the sense that something deeper was at play. Maria swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she spoke again. "I used to be just like you, smiling every day, pretending everything was okay, no matter how much it hurt inside. I worked in a small town for years as a waitress at a diner that was always filled with people who thought they were better than everyone else, celebrities, actors, musicians, people who could buy anything they wanted but didn't have a clue how to treat anyone with respect. They would sit there and snap their fingers at me as if I was invisible, and I hated it. I hated how they acted like they owned the world just because they had money. Oprah listened intently as Maria's words began to unravel a story that was buried deep beneath her icy exterior. Maria's voice grew a little louder, but still, there was a tremor to it. I remember this one actor. He came in late one night, demanded the best table, refused to even look at me. When I took his order, treated me like I was nothing, just a servant there to fetch his food. He wanted his drink just the right temperature, and when I brought it to him, he said it was wrong without even looking at it. I had to go back and make it again. I remember standing there in that kitchen so angry and humiliated, and I told myself that no matter what, I would never again let someone treat me like that. I wouldn't serve anyone like that. Her voice cracked slightly, and Oprah felt a wave of understanding wash over her. She could see now why Maria was acting this way. It wasn't about Oprah or any individual. It was about something much deeper, something that Maria had carried for a long time. Oprah's mind raced as Maria's words echoed in her thoughts. She had seen how fame could distort people, how it could turn them into something they didn't even recognize, but she had never imagined the kind of resentment that could build up from that constant mistreatment. She could feel the weight of Maria's pain, and for the first time since this flight had begun, Oprah understood why Maria had acted the way she did. It wasn't personal, not really. It was something far more complicated, a defense mechanism built from years of hurt and anger. Oprah felt a pang of sympathy for her, but at the same time she felt the need to speak up, to share her own truth. "Maria, I get it, I really do," she said softly. "I know what it feels like to be treated like you're less than human, just because of who you are, or what people think you represent. But I promise you this, I don't see you that way." Maria looked up at Oprah, her eyes still wary, but now there was a flicker of something else, something like hope, something like a crack in the walls she had built so carefully around herself. Oprah continued speaking, her voice steady. "I'm not here to make you feel less than or to pretend like I'm something more than I am. I'm just a person trying to get through the world just like you. And I don't want to be the source of your anger or pain, but I want to understand. And if you'll let me, I can show you that not everyone is like those people you've encountered." The words flowed from her naturally, and she saw Maria's expression soften just a fraction. The wall between them wasn't fully gone, but Oprah could feel it beginning to crumble. Maria stood there, her eyes searching Oprah's face for something that wasn't immediately apparent, like she was trying to see if Oprah was genuine, or if she was just another person in a long line of people who had shown her kindness only to turn their backs when it mattered. Maria's hands clenched around the tray, as if she were preparing herself for a response, but she didn't speak. At first the silence between them stretched, but this time it wasn't as tense, it was softer, almost as if something had shifted in the air around them. Oprah held her gaze steady, her heart racing a little faster. Now she didn't know what Maria was thinking, but she knew that whatever came next would be crucial. Oprah could feel that this was a crossroads, a moment where things could go one way or the other, where the bitterness Maria had been holding onto could either break through or dissipate into understanding. Maria's eyes flickered with emotion, but she quickly masked it with a cool composure. She hadn't been expecting Oprah to say what she had said. She hadn't been prepared for the vulnerability in Oprah's voice or the quiet sincerity that was now in the air between them. But it was there, and it was real. Maria looked away for a moment, as if trying to collect herself. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice low and a little unsteady. "You don't know what it's like to have people treat you like you don't matter," she whispered. It was a simple statement, but the weight of it was heavy, and Oprah could hear the pain behind the words, the years of hurt and humiliation that had built up inside Maria. It wasn't just about the flight, it wasn't just about the drink refusal, it was about a lifetime of being unseen and unheard, and Oprah felt the full depth of that in the space between them. Oprah's chest tightened as she listened to Maria speak. There was so much unsaid in those words, so much hidden beneath the surface, that Oprah hadn't fully understood until now. Maria had carried this weight for so long. She had built up walls not just against the entitled people she had encountered, but against anyone who might remind her of that feeling of being dismissed as less than human. Oprah knew that feeling all too well. She had been in the public eye for decades, and she had encountered her fair share of people who saw her as a symbol, not a person, but she also knew how to move past it, how to rise above it. And now she was beginning to see the depth of Maria's pain and the real reason for her coldness. "I may not know exactly what you've been through, Maria," Oprah said softly, her voice steady but filled with empathy. "But I do know what it feels like to be treated like you're invisible, to be seen as something less, just because of what people think of you or how they perceive you. And I know how it feels to carry that weight and have it shape everything you do." Oprah paused, her heart in her throat. She was treading carefully now because she could see that Maria's defenses were starting to crack, and she didn't want to say the wrong thing. But she knew she had to keep going, she had to reach her. "But Maria, there's a choice we make when we feel that way. We can let it build walls around us and keep everyone at arm's length, or we can decide to tear those walls down and let the right people in." Maria didn't respond at first. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. But Oprah could see the shift in her expression, the way her face softened just a little, the hardness in her eyes starting to fade. It was like a small crack in the armor she had spent so long building around herself. Oprah reached out gently, her hand resting on the armrest. Between them, a gesture of openness, not of power, not of authority, just a simple offer of connection and understanding. Maria looked up at her, then her eyes searching Oprah's face, as if trying to find something to believe in. "I don't want to be someone who holds on to all that anger anymore." Maria's voice was barely a whisper now, her words filled with uncertainty. "I don't want to feel like I have to be this person who pushes everyone away just because I'm scared." Oprah nodded slowly, feeling the weight of Maria's admission settling into her bones. She had been right. This wasn't about the drink. This wasn't even about the flight. This was about a lifetime of scars and struggles that had led to this moment. And now they were both standing on the edge of something different, something that could change everything for both of them. "You don't have to be that person anymore, Maria," Oprah said gently, her voice full of compassion. "You can choose to let go of the fear and the anger and start fresh if you want to." The words hung in the air between them, a possibility, a chance for healing, a new beginning. But it wasn't up to Oprah to decide, it was up to Maria. She could only offer the invitation and hope that Maria was ready to take it. Maria looked at her for a long moment, her eyes wide with emotion, a tear slipping down her cheek that she quickly wiped away. But it didn't matter. Oprah could see it now. She could see the shift happening within Maria, the change that was unfolding one step at a time. Maria took a shaky breath, her eyes searching Oprah's face, as if looking for something she couldn't quite find yet. But Oprah's gaze was steady, her heart open and full of compassion. She could see the vulnerability in Maria now. The cracks in the armor were clear, and for the first time in this entire flight, the tension between them felt less like a battle and more like a quiet moment of understanding. Maria wiped her cheek, quickly trying to hide the tear, but Oprah saw it, and something inside her shifted. She knew that Maria wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She wasn't just a woman who had refused her a drink. She was someone who had been carrying an unbearable weight for far too long. Oprah could feel it in the air between them, the heaviness of unspoken words, the years of hurt that had built up like a fortress around Maria's heart. And now they were both standing at the edge of something that could change everything. "Maria," Oprah said softly, her voice almost a whisper. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with Maria's. "You don't have to carry all of this alone. You don't have to keep building walls around yourself just because of the pain people have caused you." Oprah paused, her heart racing, as she spoke the words she had learned over the years, that sometimes it wasn't enough to tell someone they could heal. It wasn't enough to offer sympathy. What really mattered was offering understanding and the possibility of change. But the decision to let go of the past was always up to the person carrying it. And Oprah knew that Maria was at a crossroads in that moment, a chance to let the past fade into the background and move forward into something new. Maria shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flicking down to the tray in her hands before meeting Oprah's eyes again. It was clear that she was fighting with herself, wrestling with the pain that had built up for so long. "I don't know how to let it go," Maria whispered, her voice trembling. The words were soft, but the rawness behind them was palpable. It was a cry for help wrapped in uncertainty, a plea for permission to finally release the anger, the hurt, the resentment that had been keeping her prisoner for so many years. Oprah's chest tightened. She could hear the quiet desperation in Maria's voice, and her heart went out to her. "You don't have to know how," Oprah said gently, her words filled with warmth. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now. The important thing is that you're open to the possibility of healing. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders anymore. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, not to me, not to anyone on this plane." Oprah paused, feeling the weight of her own words, the truth in them. "And you certainly don't have to push people away just because you're afraid they'll hurt you." Oprah's voice softened even further as she spoke the words she had said to herself countless times through the years, the lessons she had learned from her own struggles, the moments of self-doubt that had almost consumed her, but she had learned to rise above it. And now she was offering that same understanding to Maria. Maria stood still, her face a mask of emotion. But behind the walls, Oprah could see the struggle, the fear, the hesitation. Maria had spent so many years building those walls brick by brick, and now someone was offering her a way out. But it was up to Maria to decide if she would take it. Oprah didn't press her. She didn't rush the moment. She simply let it sit there between them like a quiet invitation. And for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the cabin was the soft hum of the engines, the occasional rustling of papers, and the distant chatter of passengers. But in that moment, everything felt still. Everything felt like it was holding its breath, as if the entire flight had paused, waiting for Maria to make her decision. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can just let it all go, but maybe I can try." Oprah smiled gently, her heart swelling with relief. There was hope in Maria's words, hope that she could begin to heal, hope that she could begin to forgive herself and others for the pain they had caused her. And Oprah knew that this was just the beginning. It wasn't going to be easy, it wasn't going to be an overnight change, but it was a start. And sometimes that was all it took, one small step forward, one decision to open up to the possibility of something different. And in that moment, Oprah knew that Maria's journey had just begun. Maria gave a small nod, and for the first time since their conversation began, a glimmer of something that looked like peace flickered in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Oprah knew that they had crossed a threshold together. A moment of understanding had been forged, and now it was up to Maria to carry it forward. Oprah leaned back in her seat, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment, but also an understanding that this moment was bigger than just a flight. It was about the kind of human connection that could change lives even in the most unexpected places. And as the plane soared through the sky, Oprah couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected lessons life had a way of offering when you least expected them. The moments that followed were silent yet filled with an unspoken understanding. Oprah watched Maria as she stood there, her hands still holding onto the tray, but now her grip was a little looser. There was a shift in the air between them, a subtle change that Oprah could feel, but Maria still seemed unsure, her eyes darting from side to side, as if trying to figure out what to do with this new sense of vulnerability. She had just opened up to Oprah, saw the struggle within her, the uncertainty about how to move forward, how to let go of the years of anger and bitterness that had been buried so deep within her. For so long, it wasn't going to be easy to let go of all that pain. Oprah knew that much, but she also knew that healing had to start somewhere, and sometimes it started with a single conversation, a moment of connection. Maria's eyes lingered on Oprah for a moment before she looked down again, her mind racing with the weight of everything Oprah had just said. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully accept the invitation Oprah had offered, but she knew something had changed inside her. It was like a small spark had been lit, a spark that could grow into something more if she allowed it to. She had spent so long building walls, keeping people at a distance, because it felt safer that way. But now the walls didn't seem as sturdy as they once had. They felt fragile, as if they could come crumbling down at any moment. And for the first time in a long time, Maria wasn't sure if she wanted to hold on to them anymore. Oprah could see the struggle in Maria's face, the way her lips trembled slightly as she fought with herself. She didn't rush her. She let the silence stretch, letting Maria come to her own conclusions. Oprah knew better than anyone that healing didn't happen on someone else's timeline. It happened when the person was ready, and Maria wasn't quite there yet. But Oprah could feel that she was getting closer with every word, every gesture of understanding. She could see Maria wrestling with her own feelings of inadequacy and fear. But Oprah was there. She wasn't going anywhere. She would be patient, because she knew that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do for someone was simply to be there and let them know they weren't alone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Maria spoke, her voice small but steady. "I spent so many years building this armor around me because I didn't want anyone to get close. I didn't want anyone to see the broken parts of me." Maria's voice caught in her throat for a moment, but she pushed through the words, tumbling out like a confession. "I thought that if I kept everyone at a distance, I wouldn't get hurt again. I thought that if I acted like I didn't care, it would make the pain go away. But it never did. It just kept eating away at me." She paused, and Oprah could see the struggle in her eyes. She was wrestling with the truth of her own emotions, the weight of everything she had kept buried for so long. Oprah leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Maria, you don't have to carry all of that alone anymore. You don't have to hold onto the pain that others have caused you or the fear that you've been carrying. You can let it go bit by bit. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to try." Oprah's words were simple, but they carried weight. They were a reminder that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward with the understanding that the past didn't have to define who you were or who you could become. Maria looked up at her then, and for the first time there was something different in her gaze, something that Oprah had never seen before. It wasn't defiance or coldness. It wasn't even uncertainty. It was something softer, something more open, as if for the first time Maria was beginning to see the possibility of something different. And it was terrifying, but also beautiful. Oprah could see it. She could see the way Maria was letting her walls come down bit by bit, and it was an incredibly vulnerable thing to witness. Oprah knew that it would take time. It wouldn't happen overnight, but she was proud of Maria for taking this first step. "I don't know how to let go of all the anger and the hurt," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was a sense of relief in her words, like she had finally given voice to something she had kept buried for far too long. "I don't know if I can ever forgive the people who hurt me, but maybe I can start by forgiving myself for holding on to all of it." Oprah nodded, her eyes filled with compassion. "That's the hardest part, Maria, forgiving yourself. But it's also the most important part, because if you can't forgive yourself, you can't truly heal." Oprah let the words sink in before adding, "It's a journey. You don't have to do it all at once. Just take it one step at a time, and know that you don't have to do it alone." Oprah offered a warm smile that was full of understanding, and Maria gave a small nod, her face still tinged with uncertainty, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. The moment hung in the air between them for a long while, and for the first time in a long time, Oprah felt a sense of peace settle within her. There was something incredibly powerful about the connection they had shared in these few moments. It wasn't just about offering advice or wisdom. It was about offering a space where both of them could be vulnerable, where both of them could see the humanity in each other. It was about breaking down the walls that separated them and realizing that sometimes the most healing thing you can do for someone is simply to let them know they're not alone. And in that moment, Oprah knew that she and Maria had begun a journey together, one that would take time, but one that could change both of their lives forever. As the plane soared higher into the sky, the tension between them seemed to ease just a little. Maria stood there, her eyes focused on the floor, her hands now resting lightly on the tray in front of her. She hadn't spoken since Oprah's last words, but there was a noticeable shift in her demeanor. Something had changed in her. Maybe not everything, but something, and Oprah could feel it. A quiet understanding had passed between them. And while the journey wasn't over, she could see that Maria was starting to let go of the walls she had built around herself, the ones that had kept her from truly connecting with people, the ones that had made her push away kindness and warmth even when it was offered to her. Maria lifted her eyes slowly and met Oprah's gaze. There was something different in her eyes, now something softer, less guarded, less defensive. Oprah didn't say anything at first. She simply waited. She knew that Maria wasn't quite ready to speak yet, but Oprah could see that something was stirring within her, a shift that was almost imperceptible. But still Maria seemed to be thinking about everything they had talked about. And Oprah gave her the space to process it. She wasn't going to rush her into saying anything. She understood that this wasn't a moment that could be forced. It had to unfold on its own terms. After what felt like a long stretch of silence, Maria spoke, her voice still hesitant but clearer than before. "I don't know if I believe I can truly let go of everything just yet, but I think I'm starting to see that maybe there's another way." Her voice trailed off for a moment, as if she were weighing her own words, as if she were trying to find the courage to fully embrace them. Oprah smiled gently, her heart swelling with pride at the small but significant shift that Maria was making. She wasn't just hearing the words Oprah had said, she was starting to internalize them. She was beginning to realize that healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about choosing to move forward despite the hurt, choosing to live differently than before. "You don't have to have it all figured out right away, Maria," Oprah said softly, her voice warm with understanding. "The journey is long, and it's okay to take it one step at a time. Sometimes it's about making the decision to move forward, even when it feels scary, even when it feels like you don't know what comes next." Maria nodded slowly, her expression still thoughtful, but there was a slight softness in her eyes that Oprah hadn't seen before. It wasn't much, but it was a sign of progress. Oprah had been in this place herself before, the place where change seemed too overwhelming to even consider. But she had learned that the first step was always the hardest, and once you took it, the rest of the journey felt just a little bit lighter. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the plane and the soft whispers of passengers around them. The cabin felt oddly peaceful despite the chaos of the world outside, and Oprah found herself feeling grateful for this moment, for the opportunity to connect with Maria in a way that went beyond the surface level, beyond the roles they played on the plane, beyond the titles and the expectations that came with them. This was about two human beings meeting each other in their rawness and vulnerability, and in that moment Oprah realized just how powerful those kinds of connections could be. Maria looked at Oprah again, her eyes filled with something that Oprah couldn't quite name. But it was real, it was gratitude, it was recognition of the kindness that had been shown to her, and for the first time in a long time Maria seemed to relax just a little bit, the tightness in her shoulders ease, and she let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding in. "Thank you," Maria said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. Oprah could hear the sincerity in her words, and it made something shift in her chest. She didn't say anything at first, she just nodded, letting the moment breathe. Because sometimes words weren't needed, sometimes simply being there and offering a listening ear was enough. As the plane continued on its journey to its destination, Oprah felt a quiet sense of peace wash over her, the kind of peace that comes from knowing that you've been a part of something meaningful, that you've been able to connect with another person in a way that was honest and real, the kind of peace that comes when you realize that healing is a journey, not a destination, and it can happen anywhere, even on a plane flying through the sky, somewhere between the past and the future. Maria walked away after a few moments, her steps a little lighter than before, and Oprah leaned back in her seat, feeling a quiet satisfaction, knowing that sometimes the most unexpected encounters could leave the biggest impact. This wasn't just about one conversation or one flight. It was about the understanding that we all carry pain, and we all have the capacity to heal if we're given the space to do so. Oprah smiled to herself and closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the soft hum of the engines and the distant sound of Maria's footsteps as she moved down the aisle. She didn't know what the future held for Maria, but she knew that today had been a turning point for her, and that was enough.